Welcome to the Reinvention Show with your host, Carol Wayne. Today, Carol's guests are Steve Olsher and Pamela Chatri. I'm your producer, Keith Vachon, and now your host, Carol Wayne.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Reinvention Show, the one and only show that educates, entertains, and inspires you on your journey for reinvention. Today, we're talking about reinventing in retirement. Yeah, you know, when you're employed, you can't wait to be away from the boss. You're no longer accountable to anyone. You can do what you want. You can sleep in, and it's great for a few minutes. Well, weeks, maybe. And then you go, you know what? There's so much more to life. I need to reinvent myself. I need to do something rather than just sit here in my rocking chair. So today we're going to be talking with Steve Olsher and Pamela Chatri about how to reinvent yourself in retirement and how to do it properly. So let's get started. My first guest, Pamela Chatri, is a trusted and highly respected business and self-employment coach, trainer, and keynote speaker specializing in business planning. Pamela's clients cross borders and industries. They all share one important similarity, a driving desire to succeed as a business owner. She is an advocate for boomers choosing self-employment as a rewarding last career choice over retirement or reemployment. Pamela has been awarded the Business Person of the Year from the Kitsilano Chamber of Commerce in Vancouver and the Inspiring Transformation Award by the eWomen Network. An ardent supporter of all things entrepreneurial, Pamela's mission is to see the entrepreneurial spirit soar in small business owners across the globe. Welcome to the show, Pamela.
Welcome to you too. Thank you so much for having me here this morning. This is a topic that is so near and dear to my heart, and I'm excited to be a part of this discussion. Thank you, Carol.
Oh, you're welcome. So, Pamela, give us a little bit about your backstory and tell us how you became involved in helping people reinvent themselves in retirement.
Yeah, that's a great question. I have spent my whole life helping people to start businesses, and it's helped them starting, helping them to operate, to run them, and to help them look at what makes a profitable business and what makes a business work smart so that owners don't have to work as hard. And there's joys of being an entrepreneur, but there's also a lot of pitfalls that many owners move into. And I call it the hamster on the wheel syndrome, where they're working very, very hard and they're not really seeing a return on their investment. And I think also their life goes out of balance. So what I started to see quickly was that owners that were heading towards their 50s were starting to look at their businesses in a different way. They wanted life balance, they wanted an opportunity to work less hard, and they wanted to set their business up for sale or for closure so that they could retire. What quickly started to come on the radar was that they really didn't want to retire, they just wanted to do life differently. And they wanted to use your term, reinvent themselves and their business. And so I started to realize that they needed support in transitioning out of their businesses, but also there were people that were coming onto my radar that were saying, gosh, you know, I'm bored out of my mind. I retired from the government, from the RCMP, from whatever, you know, often with good pensions, teachers, who said, you know, I like the idea of opening a business. So we had two segments to the market. One that were trying to get out of being an entrepreneur, but really didn't know how to do it. And then the other side was those who wanted to look at their businesses as an opportunity to create something exciting and vibrant and fun. And they looked at, for the first time, instead of being an employee, they went, wow, maybe I could run my own show.
Cool.
Yeah, so really kind of a neat, you know, excitement to that, and so started to work with those people, and you know, as life often happens, as soon as you start to see the need, you know, people start to come onto your radar.
Absolutely. So tell me, what does life look like after retirement? I don't think it's something that I will ever have to worry about, but what does it look like for those who do retire?
You know, that's a great question. Just recently, one of our Vancouver financial advisors, Tracy Thames, she and another financial advisor that she partners with, Kamel Basra, have Tracy has written a book called The Financially Empowered Woman. And in this book, they have identified 4 phases to retirement in the way that we know it. And it's interesting because the traditional form of we retire, we head for the rocking chair, and that's it. Life is complete. And that's not the case anymore. What they're saying now, and there's no age demographic on this for the first 2 phases. The first phase they call productive engagement. And this is retirement where we are still looking for new opportunities, where we do things not maybe necessarily our primary occupation, but we work in a different career or we make a different choice. And we're in a career where we cut back to 3 days a week, maybe we travel more and we leave our businesses or our lives run by somebody else. The second phase they call Kilimanjaro, which I just love. This is the area where we really are not actively engaged in a career per se, but we're looking at all of those things on our bucket lists and saying, you know what, I would love to go to India and, visit an ashram, or I would love to climb Kilimanjaro, or I would love to work in an orphanage in a country that needs my support. So it's that, this is a very expensive phase to employment, by the way, or pardon me, retirement. The next phase we look at is home is where the heart is. And I relate this one to my mom. My mother is 82 years old, and I would think now she is at what we used to think of retirement being, where truly she doesn't want to travel as much. She used to travel extensively. She's comfortable in her home. She's not comfortable anywhere else, but she doesn't want to leave her home yet. And this is the least expensive phase of retirement as we know it. But the next phase, the last phase that Tracy and Kamel have identified, is called the living in community. And this is the most expensive phase of retirement. It's where now we need the home care. We need to be retiring to communities where we are taken care of, where we have to have nursing care. And this is often into now, when you want to put an age demographic on it, it's more into our late 80s and 90s. That's how far down the road retirement in its traditional forms are taking now. Okay. So just taking that as the foundational piece for retirement, we have shifted from that traditional model into, I believe, these 4 phases that are very appropriate.
Cool, thank you. Now, so why would someone reinvent themselves after retirement?
Oh, I think they would reinvent themselves because we all need purpose. Let's face it, if you get up every day and you do the same thing, after you retire from a very active career, let's take the police force or being a teacher, you're contributing a great deal to your community. You feel valued. It's feeding your extrinsic needs, but also your intrinsic needs. And when we retire, where do we get that from? Golf is only good to a point. So we reinvent ourselves because human beings need purpose.
Yeah, absolutely.
We need vision. We need something to look forward to.
So why do you recommend self-employment rather than re-employment?
Well, I love it. I think it's. I think it has endless possibilities. But Walmart doesn't suit most people. Let's face it here. Being a Walmart greeter is not the ideal career. Nothing against Walmart, but it's or McDonald's. These are not valued careers for people who have been contributors to our society and have great brain power, and have a lot of skills and talent. So self-employment gives a number of opportunities. I mean, you can be a contractor. You can provide consulting services to organizations. And I see a lot of people reinventing themselves as consultants. they've taken their skills and they're now going back into businesses and giving, back to those organizations. It also gives us an opportunity. Self-employment is a great way to take control over our lives, our day-to-day lives, our schedules. Gives you the chance to travel. You can open a business in a foreign country. You can have flex time with it. You can control how much you work, how many holidays you take, how many visits to the grandkids you're going to make. You can work when you're visiting the grandkids when you're self-employed if your business is structured correctly. So I think it's endless, and it is the perfect opportunity for the retirees to do something valued back to themselves and to our community.
Great. Now, are there some obstacles that you see that happen regularly, particularly for people that used to be employees and now they're going to be self-employed?
The biggest obstacle is financial. There is many people have great pensions that are retiring from. I always refer back to the police or teachers, those kinds of things. Where are the finances coming from that are going to fund the business? And if we go back to a good financial plan, it's important to have various pots of financial savings. Where are we taking our money from? And one of the biggest obstacles is making sure that you're not drawing the funds to support the business out of your savings pot that's going to take you to that last phase, that living in community, where you're needing those medical costs covered, or the good extended care, or whatever it is that you're requiring. So the financial, there's a lot of financial planning that I always encourage any self-employment opportunity to really explore. And I think the other piece that's important is looking at the personal life. What are the obstacles that you're going to face opening a business that you're not prepared for? What are your weaknesses? What do you have to hire for or contract out for? Many of us don't, look hard at ourselves and say, okay, this is what I absolutely hate doing. What is it that I don't want to do in this business? And making sure that in the business plan there are those human resources needs addressed. And they don't look hard enough at their own weaknesses. They only look at their strengths. And I think the third obstacle that I would always encourage anyone looking at self-employment to review is how is their life going to change when they have this business? It's and I'm Carol. I know you're an entrepreneur, and many of us are, and we don't think realistically about what the demands of the business are going to be, and how our life is going to change, because we've traded work for self-employment, which is also work.
That's right. And sometimes it's a lot more work, and you don't leave it at 4 o'clock when you leave the office.
Exactly. So three very, very big obstacles that need to be planned and addressed, and then put your plan B and plan C in place once you've looked at them.
Cool. Yeah. Now, what kind of businesses are you finding that retirees are opening? Are they opening traditional businesses? Are they opening service businesses? Consulting? What are they doing?
Oh, I am in admiration of the human creativity and innovation that's coming into play. I have a great example of a woman who opened a craft business at 78 years old, and she's operating it still at 85. And she makes hundreds of crafts, and she literally goes from craft show to craft show all year. And that's what she does, is produce. And she doesn't need the money. It's not motivated by money. It's motivated by the fact that she loves to hang out with people. And she loves to see people's happiness with all of the knitting that she does and the pot holders that she makes. So, that's an example of someone who started a business late in life and has been doing it now for, I think it's 5 years, and is very successful at it. And she's known as the craft lady. But there's other examples of businesses are very non-traditional. More and more we're getting creative. We're opening bed and breakfasts in Belize. We're opening surf shops in Costa Rica. We're taking yoga classes and opening our own yoga studios. we're transferring our knowledge, and we're opening businesses that are supportive third world countries. So all the proceeds back from companies are going back to villages in Africa. And it's become a business for these people. They're saying, without revenue, we can't make a difference in our globe, in our world. So the businesses are as innovative and creative as the people are that are opening them.
That's
And
great.
not a lot of traditional. No, there's not a lot of retail stores opening or manufacturing, those kinds of things. It's more to the small business that is saying, I can work this 40 hours a week, or I can work this 20 hours a week.
So a lifestyle business.
A lifestyle business. That's a great way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Now, I just read on Facebook about a fellow who had written 40 manuscripts when he was younger, and then when his wife passed away, he started to write again at the age of 93. Did you read that story?
No, but I love it. Then there you go. He's an entrepreneur.
Yeah, and then he finished his book and he sent it to a publishing house, and the publishing house, his manuscript ended up on the pile with all the others, and then someone saw it, and he said his 90s were his most productive years because he wrote 4 books between then, and I think it was 103 or something like that. It was a pretty amazing story.
Yeah, it's inspiring, and it's saying to all of us that you can be anything you want at any age. Yeah, the only thing that's stopping you is you.
Right. Cool. Well, that's going to segue very nicely into our next conversation with Steve Olsher. And Steve Olsher is the author of What is Your What? He's known as the world's foremost reinvention expert. And he is famous for helping individuals and corporations become exceptionally clear on their what, the one thing they were created to do. His practical, no-holds-barred approach to life and business propels his clients toward achieving massive profitability while also cultivating a life of purpose, conviction, and contribution. He is the New York Times bestselling author of What is Your What? Discover the one amazing thing you were born to do. He's an international keynote speaker and an in-demand media guest who has appeared on CNN, Fox Business, and other national outlets, and The Reinvention Show. Welcome, Steve Olsher.
The best and biggest show of them all.
Absolutely. And now we've got the America's Reinvention Specialist and the Queen of Reinvention together on the same show. How cool is that?
If we don't reinvent someone's lives, we are definitely in trouble.
I know, we hang up our shingles and away we go. So, Steve, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your backstory and how to figure out what is your what?
So, pretty much lifelong entrepreneur. Started when I was, old enough to pick up a rake and move some leaves around. I've just always sort of been wired to try to make a dollar. So that got me into a number of things very early, including opening up my own nightclub when I was 20. It was a non-alcohol nightclub. Got involved in catalogs and .coms and real estate, and a number of things over the years. If it paid, I probably gave it a shot at some point in my career. But it's been really interesting because for the last 5 years, it was such an interesting conversation listening to you guys just talk about reinvention and retirement, and I don't feel as though I was in that retirement mindset, but I certainly was in that mode of transition, if you will. And about 5 years ago, just to kind of give you the impetus for what brought me towards my current work, I was with my stepfather, who was very much a father to me, raised me since I was 10, and unfortunately he was in his last days of life, and as I sat there, I was holding his hand, and he could no longer communicate verbally, but I believe we were able to connect through that point of physical touch because I had a vision of my funeral, not actually of his funeral, but of mine, and I could hear the words being spoken graveside, which were basically, "Here lies Steve Olsher. He dedicated his life to chasing the almighty dollar," and that's all that was said.
Ooh.
And, I think it became very clear in that moment that, he was really showing me my inevitable fate unless I changed course. And up until that point, it was an accurate statement. That's certainly how the eulogy would have been read because I was basically pursuing and selling widgets, right? I mean, that's the best way to put it. I mean, we all need things, glasses and, phones and, I don't know, whatever else. I mean, we all need these things, or we believe we need these things to survive and get through our days. But, really, does that widget sort of oriented business, does that add any real value to people's lives that impact you or I to create a legacy that, not only affects those who share this lifetime with us, but also those of lifetimes to come? And, I came to the realization, to the understanding, the answer is no. And, I was in real estate at the time pretty heavily, and it got me thinking that, if I were to die, my tenants weren't going to line up at my funeral and pay their respects. I mean, they would probably just want to know, like, where do I send next month's rent so I don't get evicted? And so it was just like, man, I didn't know where to start, but I knew that I had some things that I thought had worked well for me in my life. So I started writing in the hope of maybe sharing some of the tools and shortcuts and strategies that might flatten the learning curve for others. And it's interesting because as I started writing and then started teaching, the intuitive gifts that I never really knew existed started coming to the surface. And, I'm not egotistical enough to think that the ideas that I have, the names of things that I create, the framework for discovering your what, comes from me. I don't know where it comes from, but I do know that once you open yourself up to receiving that information and open yourself up to basically being the conduit between whatever is in existence and what needs to be shared, that's when some pretty amazing things can happen.
Cool. And how did you discover your your gifts? I know for me it was the weirdest thing ever. So how did you discover what yours was?
So it's interesting, right? A lot of people talk about and still talk about passion. And so it's like, maybe I'll just find something that I'm passionate about. And that for years now we've been sort of spoon-fed this, this pretty deceiving line of thinking, this myth, if you will, that, if you do what you love, the money will follow. And I think we all know that that doesn't work. And so for me, once I started writing and I started teaching, that's when I think the majority of those gifts really did come to the surface, where I realized that, throughout my life I had been an entertainer, throughout my life I had been a communicator, throughout my life I had been an enroller, etc. And so when I first started on this path, when I started this whole, sort of what is your what conversation, I was thoroughly convinced that once you understand, once you understood what your gifts are, then everything falls into place. But what I quickly came to realize is that, number one, your what is not your passion. Your gifts are not your passion, right? Every time you bring passion to the equation, it means that you're involving feeling and you're involving emotion, right? And so what happens when you have feeling and emotion in the equation, everything becomes skewed. And now it's like, I'm just really excited about this. And it's like, we start, look, how many cupcakes, stores have closed because we were passionate about cupcakes, right? I mean, it's like there's, just a reality to what our gifts truly are and what our passion is, and how do we meld the two into a business. And so after I created this framework for helping people bring their gifts to the surface, as I said, I realized that wasn't enough. And that's when I then really understood the fact that we also have to understand the vehicle that we use to share our gifts with the world, and then perhaps equally important, the people that we're most compelled to serve. So it's the combination of the gifts, the vehicle, and the people that then help you to answer the question of what is your what. And I know the book says discover the one amazing thing you were born to do, and I guess I should probably throw a caveat on that and just say discover the one amazing thing you were born to do for now, because reality is that your gifts, I believe, are consistent. I mean, you're a communicator, Carol. We haven't gone through the exercise together, but I would venture to guess that the overarching theme that ties your gifts together is communication, right? I mean, that's probably the overarching theme of your gifts. the vehicle that you use to share those gifts with the world obviously is media, social media or writing or books or that sort of thing, but it's technically media. And then the people that you're most compelled to serve are those that are in transition. Now, certainly you probably have a different definition of that that's much more narrow and focused, but as I sit back and, watch some of the work that you do, that's the umbrella that I would put it over. But, I think that there's probably something more specific, to that work as well. But again, that's how it all ties together. And so my gifts, as I kept digging in and digging into this work, really became clear that my true gift is communication. I mean, that is really where it all is based for me.
Cool. Now, is that your framework then, those three elements that you just explained, or is the framework a little bit different?
No, I mean, and that's the thing, is I actually started certifying people to teach the framework this year because it's so simple. And it's, in other words, it's applicable for anyone at any age of any stage, no matter where they are. We had people in from Colombia and Mexico and Australia and Canada and the States, because there's so many different ways that this can be applied, but it's universal. And it is once you understand the teaching and the framework behind it, then you can see how all sort of the foundational work that we do first to support the new you that you're going to become is necessary at stage 1. Stage 2, we go over really how to live. School teaches you how to read and write and do some math, but doesn't really do a very good job of teaching you how to live with purpose and conviction. And then step 3, we move into answering that question of what is your what. And there's very specific steps that help people get to the answers for what their gifts are, what their vehicle is, and then the people that they're most compelled to serve. So each of those has a process to it, but it's very teachable. And I mean, as you know, Carol, I mean, there's only one of me, there's only one of you. We can only do so much on our own, and so that's really why it's exciting now for me to be able to certify other people, because I can't wait to see what they do with this, because I just have my perspective, right? And so I've set this in motion, and I'm really excited to see what the others do with it. It's a very it's an exciting time right now.
Yeah, it sure is. And I mean, when you start explaining your process to other people, and then you see how they take it, as you said, with their own perception and their own gifts and their own experience and intuition, I think what will happen at the end is that you'll have like a different product, which is really cool. It's reinventing the reinvention product. So right. That's good.
Yeah, and that's what happened when I started teaching. So I started the class that I started teaching was called the Reinvention Workshop. And so the Reinvention Workshop is where I started teaching all of this fun stuff that started out with my first book and then morphed into what it is now with What Is Your What. But as I began teaching, it really did change the framework of that process. And as I tweaked the process, it affected the teaching, right? And so what I would encourage anyone to do, excuse me while I'm fighting over a cold here, what I would encourage anyone to do while they are in the process of reinvention is stop thinking about it. Just go out and do something, right? I mean, because the reality is that for most of us, we wait for all the stars to align. We wait for someone to come with a sword and just like anoint you, right? And just say, now is your time. Just go ahead and, everything is ready now. And it's like, that's never going to happen. And so I just encourage people, even if you don't know what your gifts are, even if you don't know what the vehicle is, and frankly, most people will go through life without solving one part of that equation, gifts, vehicle, or people, let alone all three. But the way to get it rolling is to get in motion. And that's when all of these different ways of being will come to the surface that, frankly, so many of us are afraid to even allow out, right, if you will. And that's a whole nother discussion. But, it's denial is a real mother in this world.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure this fear topic's going to come up when we have our powwow in a few minutes. Yeah. So it's very interesting that you said that your gift started to come to the surface when you started to write, because that's what happened with me too. And had I not taken a leap at an opportunity that came, an opportunity that I'd never even considered as part of my bucket list, and to write a book. I wrote the Guerrilla Tourism, let me say that again, Guerrilla Tourism Marketing book with J. Conrad Levinson. If I hadn't written that book, I wouldn't have uncovered that, I really didn't like certain parts of what I was writing about, and that other parts were better. So did you have a similar process, or did you have a similar situation when you were writing, that you realized that there was stuff that you didn't really like and there was stuff that you really loved?
First of all, let me say that I love Jay. He actually gave one of the last keynotes at an event that I do called Internet Profits Live, and that was just such an amazing man, amazing experience. That said, I didn't have really a place that I was starting, so it's hard to say that things sort of moved in a different direction as I went through the process, because I know this sounds woo-woo and flowery, right? But I really just sort of let it flow, and like, I don't care if you've seen the book or not, but there's exercises in the book like the vortex of vulnerability and the vortex of invincibility, and then the 7 life-altering principles, and the 7 seeds of your soul. I mean, I don't know where all that crap comes from, Carol. I have no idea. So I couldn't even sit there and say that that existed and then it got modified. It just, I don't know. I
know. I mean, I did the same, Steve. I was at an event and the pitch was going on, and all of a sudden, from nowhere, came force formula, super reinvention process, stars reinvention pillars, and I'm like, where did that come from? But right. Hey, it's good. I'm going to use it.
Yeah, exactly.
So cool. So, any last words on what is your what before we bring Pamela back and have a discussion about more about retirement?
Yeah, I think that the way that I'll summarize it is, one of my coaching clients, Andrew Robinson, who's about 60 some odd years old when she started working with me, she said, as we went through stuff about, 3-4 months in, she said that it took me almost 60 years to recognize that I am the solution to someone else's problem. And I truly believe that we each are the solution to someone else's problem. She just articulated it in a way that was just so simple and beautiful. And I strongly believe that, kind of like the butterfly effect, right? If you don't put in motion something that you really were sort of, pushed to do, signaled to do, whatever you want to call it, it not only affects you, but it really does affect millions of lives down the line. And so you're doing not only yourself a huge disservice by not tapping into how you're naturally wired to excel and sharing those gifts with others, but you truly are impacting the lives of others who are waiting for you.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. So great segue into our panel discussion. Thanks very much, Steve. So Pamela, come on back. Join us.
Great point, Steve. I am sitting here nodding, and it's good stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, so let's start talking about fear, because I know that's what stops a lot of people from doing a lot of things. So how do you address your clients and their fear of reinventing themselves? Who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Steve.
Okay. So, first of all, everybody's got their own acronym for fear, right? Mine is forget everything about reality. And so, the truth is, things never go as good as you hope they will, or as bad as you think they might, right? And so fear to me it's basically built on the premise of this perceived safety net, that we think if we make that leap, then for whatever reason that net is going to be pulled. And so if things don't go as we planned, then we're, up over our heads, we're done. And so there's two things. Number one, I don't believe in fear. I don't believe in failure. I think that it makes perfect sense for people to go at things with caution, right, and to understand why they're doing what they're doing. But at the same token, first I view failure as success with an unintended ending. And so that's the first thing that I share with them. And so just because you give something a whirl doesn't mean you're a failure. I mean, that's just a term of ignorance that weak-minded people like to throw out at those who dare to soar, in an attempt to bring them down. But then the second thing is that what I tell them is you can always go back to pumping gas. And of course they look at me like, what the hell are you talking about? And so, my point being, and I don't have to go into the whole story, but there's something you can do, right? I don't care if it's waiting tables, if it's pumping gas, if it's, hammering a nail into a piece of wood. You have skill doing something, and if whatever it is that you put yourself out there to do doesn't come to fruition in the way that you thought that it might, you can always go back to pumping gas. And just sort of having them understand that safety net, in fact, does exist, and that no one's going to come and bust your kneecaps, right? I mean, we don't live in that society just because you gave something a try. And could it be a financial burden for a period of time? Of course. But, hell, everything that we have is a financial burden for the most part. So, how is that any different?
Cool. All right. Thanks. And Pamela?
I take a different approach. I'm all about planning. And call me logical, but, I believe that plans are what removes that safety net and that risk. I always liken in my workshops and keynotes, I liken an opportunity to maybe open a business or explore self-employment to taking a big trip. And, most of us do not get on airplanes and go to Europe or pick a country tomorrow. We like that anticipation of a holiday that, we're saying, well, I'm going to go to Europe next April. And then you work backwards from that. And then you start to say, okay, where am I going to go? What countries am I going to visit? What dates am I going to be flying? What airlines will I be looking at? Where will I stay? What legal needs do I have? Do I need shots? Do I need passports? It's a total metaphor for planning a life plan in our next careers, in our next businesses. And so if we take that time and we write down every question that we have about self-employment as an opportunity in our retirement, we can say, all right, now my job is to walk through those questions and find answers so that I feel prepared to make the decision. And it removes that sense of lack of control about the decision. It also removes the risk elements a lot more when we're prepared to take that next leap. So I like the personal plans, and I, of course, am all about business planning. And so to me, it's taking that time before, and I agree with Steve, you can take a leap, take some small steps. If you all of a sudden decide you want to open a business that's a yoga business and you've never done yoga, well then start to take some steps. Go learn yoga. See if you like it first before you decide you're going to operate a yoga studio. So yes, some steps. What can you plan for? What can you learn? What do you need to learn? Very, very important that you practice certain elements. And then, of course, I'm all about the big P word of plan.
Right. Now, one of the areas that I work with people is to ask them to imagine what their ideal lifestyle is and what their ideal life is. Because what I discovered when I was reinventing myself was that I had started down a path to become a digital marketer. And I had created a digital marketing company and, taken all these courses and learned everything I possibly could. And then I realized that this is not going to fit in with my ideal lifestyle. So I think that's really important for people to understand that they could end up creating a business that is completely opposite to what they want from their life. So how do you go about addressing that with people?
Well, that's that upfront exploration stage. That we're speaking about. Better to find out. I always say if you've done a life plan, a career assessment plan, and a business plan around your concepts or your ideas, and you come to the end of that plan and you don't go ahead with your idea, the business plan can help you make the decision whether it's a viable opportunity for you or not. So the upfront work is what helps you to reduce the risk of making the wrong decision. Okay. And when we're looking at retirement, I think the important thing to remember here is that you cannot afford to waste money. And there's a huge element of financial risk with anything that we do in a business. And so it's okay, you can regroup after a business failure in your 20s or your 30s, but it's much harder to regroup when you're in your 60s financially. You can't. It's almost impossible. So I err on the side of caution with decisions. Don't leap in big time spend that time going through the analysis first and the personal planning.
Cool. Thanks, Pamela. Steve, do you want to chime in here?
I mean, look, as I'm sure you can imagine, Carol, for me, it all boils down to being able to answer the key question of what is your what, right? I mean, once you understand what your gifts are, the vehicle that you'll use to share those gifts with the world and the people you're most compelled to serve, that's when you'll understand what your next step is. Now, all of that said, I do believe that there's a huge difference between what someone wants and what someone actually needs. And so as you're in the transitionary phase from whatever it is that you're doing now to whatever it is that will be next, when you're clear on what you actually need versus what it is that you believe that you want, that could spell the difference between living your what on a full-time basis a year from now versus a decade from now.
Cool. Now, I just wanted to touch on the financial just a bit because, Pamela, you brought up a very, very important point, and that is not to take your retirement funds to fund your business. How would you recommend that people start their business without risking their quote-unquote nest egg if they still have one?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think first it's working with a financial advisor to really spend some time looking at your financial picture and understanding how much disposable money you have. That's if it's your rainy day fund, that's your emergency health fund. Oh, please do not touch it. Oh my gosh, don't go there. But if you've got a nest egg of, $10,000, or be very clear on what the amount of money you have in startup funds. That it's like going to Vegas. You don't care if you lose it, right? That's not going to put you and your partner, or you're not going to lose your house. And the biggest mistake so many entrepreneurs make is they are not clear on that financial amount of money that they have to invest in the opportunity. They'll take it out of RRSPs, or their back of house savings. So look really hard. Be very clear on, how much you can invest in this business, but also doing a budget, knowing how many customers you need, knowing how much money you need in it daily, weekly, monthly, and being clear on what the expenses are. So it's a financial plan that is needed. Once you've got that number, then you have to say, can this pay me back? Because it is a loan to the business.
Right. Now let's talk about lifestyle businesses, because I personally believe that they are probably the better choice for people in retirement. So what are some of the lifestyle businesses that you see that people have been really successful with in either retirement or just changing their careers even?
Yeah, I'm loving the whole trend to a number of houses that are being turned into vacation rentals, for example. People purchasing homes that they can take the whole lower level and turn them into really great B&Bs. There's a number of sites online now where you can list your property, and these are businesses. They have guest cottages. They're turning them into small inns and boutique hotels that are really quite fun. And we have them all over Canada, the U.S., all over the world now, and those are very successful. And they're great because you can open your doors when you want to open your doors. You can close your doors when you don't want to be operating your business and you want to travel. There's a whole new market for that, and people are taking advantage of those. Another boutique, I think a trend that we're seeing more and more of is online businesses, and this is huge, where we have products and services that we're offering, and we can again be operating them anywhere in the world, and we're purchasing from all over the world, which is very cool. So I'm seeing boomers that are traveling to some great countries, purchasing in products from Africa or countries where we're making a difference in small communities globally, and they're socially conscious, and they're bringing these products back, and they're selling them online and doing very, very well with them. and it's the online retailing piece. And then again, you can shut your doors, or you can have somebody do your back of house while you're traveling the world and going to do your buying. So I think that these are some interesting trends, and not only is it making a difference to their own home and their own income, but they're also making a difference in a much more socially conscious way.
Cool, thank you. Steve,
I mean,
talk about lifestyle business.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, we're sort of off on a tangent where the assumption is that a person actually wants to create a business, right? And so a lot of the people that I know and work with that are in sort of those transitionary years, especially those that are shifting from what I call prominence to relevance, which is really about that golden shift where they have had certain success in their lives and they are now ready to move beyond sort of this monetary success and really contribute in a way that affects their legacy, in a different manner than what has brought them to this point. So, there's two different sides of the equation. One is the person who has come out of like you said earlier, Pam, a government job, right, and simply is looking for something else to do so they don't stay in the rocking chair. Now, what I have found is that most of those people don't, in fact, want to open their own business. They simply want to do something that is fulfilling for their soul and is really congruent with who they are. And so that's where sort of the alignment, piece comes in with the gifts, the vehicle, and the people, and it doesn't always then back into creating a business that reflects that. On the other side of the coin, you have people who have the financial wherewithal to create businesses that can affect whoever those people are that they're most compelled to serve in very powerful ways. Like, I know a gentleman who was diagnosed with testicular cancer, and he was able to beat the disease, but when he was suffering and in the hospital, he was surrounded by people who absolutely loved him, friends, family, etc., and he credits his recovery to that love being in his life. But as he walked around the cancer ward, he saw that so many other people that were there didn't have that same type of support system. And so he swore that if he ever beat this disease, that he would make sure that people never suffered alone again. And so he created a nonprofit that matches basically cancer sufferers of any age, of any stage, with cancer survivors who have experienced the same, sickness process, etc. Right? Because, really, it all. I believe very strongly that it all boils down to what my friend Callan Rush calls an egoic label, which is how do you raise your hand, right? If somebody says, Pam, you're a woman, yes, I am, right? If somebody says, Carol, you're a mother, I mean, it's either yes or it's no, right? And so there are certain egoic labels that we have that just simply are a part of who we are. They define the life that we have had and the experiences that we've had and who we are. And most people are drawn to serving those who have similar egoic labels. Now, there are always, some that play way off in left field where they may want to help starving children in Africa, or something of that nature. But for the most part, we're drawn to serve those who we are most drawn to, and typically that's a mirror, and it reflects who we are, what we've experienced, and the perspectives that we've had. So lots of ways to do that without necessarily starting your own business. But of course, that's certainly an option.
Well, I think, though, Steve, that's at productive engagement stage. That's what we're talking here. And I'd also like to just say that not-for-profits are also businesses. When you start a foundation, you're still operating it like a business. You have to. You cannot bring revenue in and give back to the world unless you're setting it up under a business structure. So, yes. So it's still a model it's still self-employment.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm not downplaying the fact that nonprofits are an oxymoron. I mean, we know that that's it's not reality. But at the same token, I think the point being that there are plenty of ways for people to go into a soup kitchen without creating the kitchen itself.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So for people who don't want to start a business, they can work for a nonprofit, for example. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And, frankly, the more expertise that they gain in that particular arena, the more time and energy and effort that they put into that work, the more financial reward they're going to see. But it's going to be aligned with work that they truly love doing. And so that experience is going to be very, very different.
Yeah, exactly. And it is about leaving your legacy. At some point in your life, you go, hey, you know what? What is my legacy? And how am I going to leave it? So, yeah, I don't know. I'm turning 50 this year. I was like, this has been a big year. It's like, oh, what is mine?
Yeah.
Decade birthdays do that to us, Carol.
I know, and it's like, how can I be turning 50? I only feel like I'm 30 something. Anyways, so speaking of Kilimanjaro, which was the second phase of retirement, Pamela, have you seen some really cool Kilimanjaro stories?
I think it segues back to what Steve was saying. Kilimanjaro is really that phase of when we get those life-shaking, earth-shattering moments, and we go, wow, And Steve, your story when you opened it about, your father and you, that was a great story. I think Kilimanjaro happens, and these are not, by the way, these phases that Tracy Themes identifies. These are not always in sequence. Kilimanjaro can happen when we're 40. All of a sudden we wake up one day and say, I cannot do that life anymore. I cannot live where I have been. It's just not good for me, and it's not good for my family. So I believe that the Kilimanjaros happen when they're supposed to happen. There's those moments in our lives that just make us stop in our tracks. And I have seen amazing, amazing people, reinvent themselves completely when they're only 40 years old, because they've said, I cannot live this life anymore. I am going to make a difference. And a good friend of mine, Glynis Olsher, has a company called the Mystic Micella, and she went to, now I can't remember the exact country, but she has spent the last 20 years dedicating herself to supporting a community of women in a country that has had no support whatsoever, and she has put all of this money back into purchasing herbs from them to all of her products for 20 years. Her Kilimanjaro said, you know what, I can't continue to operate a business that does not participate in the world anymore. So everybody has a great moment, aha moment.
Yeah, and I think, Carol, from my perspective, it's important to bring to the discussion here the fact that I really do think that there are 4 types of people who go through this process of getting in alignment, with who they truly are. The first group of people are what I lovingly call the birthers, right? I mean, these are the people who have known from the womb, truly who it is that they are, and they may zig and they zag, but they always seem to get on path, right? The second are those that are known as shifters. And so the shifters are those who find that maybe one piece of the gifts, vehicle, or people puzzle is just slightly off, but a tweak to one of them makes all the difference. For example, there was a woman who came to the Reinvention workshop that was a nurse. So teacher and a healer were her gifts. I mean, she knew that from the get-go, right? The vehicle that she was using to share those gifts with the world was nursing. But the people that she was most compelled to serve, she was unclear on, and she had been working in a general hospital. And once we started working together, it became very clear that she has an affinity for the disadvantaged elderly. And so once that became clear, she then shifted to working in a veterans administrative hospital. And so, that subtle shift has really made all the difference. There's reinventors, like, who totally shift on a dime, right? So, like, I got a buddy who started out as a chiropractor, had a, huge practice, went to school, a doctor, the whole nine, and woke up like Pamela was saying, and just one day said, I can't do this anymore, right? I think, Carol, you were saying that too earlier, right? And it's just like, I just can't do this. And today, fast forward about 5 years, he's known as the ambassador of love. and he helped single women find love, right? So you just never know where this is going to take you when you open it up. And and then the fourth group are what I call wanderers. Now, I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. I just mean that until you have this conversation, until the light bulb goes on, or the light switch is flipped up, a lot of people go through life without even realizing that A, they may have a what or a gift or a passion or whatever you guys want to call it, and B, these aren't conversations that we have at the dinner table. These aren't conversations that we have in our schools. And so a lot of people just go through life and reach their final stage of life without ever tapping into their DNA, their blueprint, how they're naturally wired to excel, because they were never made aware of the fact that this is even possible, right? And so I think it's our obligation, I think it's our responsibility to help turn the light bulb on for as many people as we possibly can.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of what I talk about is let's forget the status quo. Let's forget what society has taught us. Let's shake up things and let's live the life we were meant to live. And it does take bravery, and yeah, you will get tripped up, but you know what? When you've got such a strong support system around you, including people like Pamela and Steve and myself, it makes things a lot easier. So yeah. So any last words from either of you? Because this hour has zoomed by.
It has. Steve, go ahead.
So, I believe that when you look back on your life, you'll most regret failing to act than taking action and realizing what, again, those weak-minded people term as failure. Because, there just is, as you said, Carol, this hour has flown by. We are just blips in time of a constantly transforming universe. And I wholeheartedly believe that when we reach the end of our lives, we're going to meet our creator, our maker, whoever that might be in whatever form, and that creator is either going to say, look, Pamela, I gave you a gift, right? And because you selflessly shared that gift with as many and improved the lives of as many as you possibly can, you go this way. And this way looks really pleasant, harps and angels and bounties of the light, as opposed to meeting our creator and saying, hey, I gave you a gift and you did nothing with that gift and you selfishly kept it within, and you could have impacted so many, but you chose not to. You go that way, and that way looks very unpleasant, like fire and brimstone and the whole nine. So, really it's a conscious choice. And I think that as we become more and more aware of the conscious choices that we make, that will certainly affect the life that, that we end up with.
Hi there.
Hi. Yeah, all right, I'll be up in a minute. I'm working from home today. My little man's not feeling good.
Oh. Yeah. It's always fun when we have pets and children join us on the show. Keeps it real. Keeps it very real. So anyways, well, thank you very much. And I think the biggest takeaway is that we are on this planet for a reason, and that we need to figure out what that reason is and be brave enough to follow our legacy, our intended legacy, and to live the life we were meant to live. So whatever that looks like for you, make it work. Make it work one way or the other. You'll be so much happier than just sitting in your rocking chair going, oh. So there we go. There's another exciting and interesting episode of the Reinvention Show. Be sure to go to thereinventionshow.com, put in your name and email, and you will get all of the gifts that all of our guests provide to us, even shows that you don't actually get around to watching. So put your name and your email in there, and we'll also give you advance notification of the next show. For example, next week we have Mike Koenigs and Joel Comm, and we are talking about reinventing your reach. So until then, thank you, Steve. Thank you, Pamela.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Thanks.
And thank you, Keith.